everybody. Let me know if you can see me, if you can hear me. If you are, without a doubt, a styling, profiling, limousine riding, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, jet flying son of a gun. Let's see. Just waiting to see if you guys can see and hear me. Oh, duh. I can check it myself. There we go. Just tune in, ready to learn. All right. So we will start all the stuff here in just a few minutes. I like to give people about 10 minutes to hop on here. That way we're not just like out the gate running. And for the first time clinic people, now we've done a few of these. So might have a few veterans in here with me that have done a few of these now. The way the format kind of works is basically make sure you get the tabs. If you don't have the tabs, go into your 8-course bundle section, and there's a separate course called Live Clinic. And you can get the tabs there. You know what? Let me check something here real quick. Because I wonder if I forgot to do this. I think I forgot to make the tabs downloadable. Live Clinic, curriculum, tune in here. I did. They are now downloadable. You could view them before, but you couldn't download them. Now you can download them if you want to. And that you can have them up on the screen with you, or you can just have a separate window, however you're doing it. But basically, get the tabs, and we're going to go through each one. And I go through it, in my opinion, like a real fighting tooth comb, kind of explaining what my outlook is on the stuff. And then after each example, we do like a few, like 5 minutes of Q&A. Anyone who has questions, if you want me to play something again, any of that kind of stuff. So while I'm actually teaching each example, I'm not really looking at the chat. So save all your questions until that part, wherever I'm like, hey, I was like, anyone need to know anything else about this? Audio check, visual check. Thank you, Wolverine. Video and audio is all clear. How does the audio sound? I have it down quiet here, so the guitar should sound better for you guys. I should probably learn how this microphone works. Are the guitars super doubled, or can you mainly hear the guitar audio and just a little bit of the strings? That's what I'm hoping for. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing again. This is also the usual clinic thing because I have to have so many windows open. Okay, so the mic is not picking, that's not too loud. Alright, we got about 3 minutes left here before we go on. Hey, 21 people are showing up. That's awesome. And then also the main part of the clinic will be taught like this. Not with this chin cam. It'll be like like the worst camera angle ever. It'll be with this. How do I move? This way. Here we go. I'm just trying to get it in the best spot. There we go. That way you guys can see my hands clearly. And it'll be a little bit easier for you. It's so much brighter. When I set everything up, like, hour or two ago, it wasn't this bright out. Now the sun is cooking. And let's turn the brightness down a little bit on that one. There we go. But until then, there we go. Bam! And that one can barely hear the strings, just perfect. Awesome. I wish I could do it like this for the normal live shows. The reason, hey Scott! What's up, buddy? I've got all of you guys here. The reason why I can't is it's so quiet in here. It's kind of hard to get into like the mood of like jamming whenever it's this quiet. I don't know why I need it to be so loud. In your honor, oh, thank you, Chris. Hopefully it will make me sound better. Hey, you know what? It hasn't worked for me yet, but I keep trying. tin cam. Okay. Robert, the last segment of you showing the new JCM 800, how did you record loop the chords to play leads over the rhythm? The last segment of you showing the new JCM 800, how did you record? I don't think I looped anything on that, did I? Are you talking about the intro? Like the whole, Are you talking about that? Like, as far as how did I do all that stuff? I'm trying to think of a part where I had a loop in that video. I don't remember one. And if you're just tuning in, a couple more people, we will get going here in just a second. I'm just giving everybody about... I was like 2 minutes late, so I'm just giving it 10 minutes, and then we'll kick everything off. Yeah, John, let me know if that's what you're talking about, that intro thing. No, the very end. I don't remember looping anything on that. Last 20 to 30 seconds. Now you got me just... I love that Dan Electro Walnut. That was one of the guitars I was really excited because I'm really good buddies with Steve, who's one of the guys over at Dan Electro, and he's like, hey, we like voice these pickups, we did all this stuff, like, can we send you one? And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I like Dan Electros anyways, and I got it, and it sounds so, it's like they made the pickups a little bit thicker sounding, and the only reason that one isn't seen much is I've been keeping it in open G. I've been trying to do some like slide stuff in open G. But, yeah, let me hear this ending. What are you talking about? Last 20 or 30 seconds, you said. Yeah, I'm not sure. John, are you sure? 1335 of your JCM video. 1335.
See how it's hard to control? There's so much noise, but to get a good, cleanish take for the notes when all just like blowing up into each other, it took a lot. I don't know how we have to track that solo. It's forever. But I don't hold that stuff on. Scrat's not really bad.
Yeah, there's no loop on any of that stuff, my man. Let me read you the question. The last segment of your showing using it, how did you record / loop the chords to play lead over the rhythm? Yeah, I'm not sure, man. That spot in my JCM 800 video, there's no loops. I'm not sure if I'm just not understanding, because that part is when I'm just playing the fuzz solo, but there's no backing to it. Just asking the chat, anyone on here any tips for bad sustain on the higher frets? Most strings between 12 and 22. Issue affects the G string the most, but generally, all strings struggle. You could need a fret dressing. $15.35. All right, we'll do this, and then I'm gonna get it started. Oh yeah, so the outro is the same as the intro. It's just that that's just the recorded audio. So basically, everything you're hearing is different layers and different tracks. I've recorded the whole thing. And, yeah, so it's the same as the intro. Yeah. So I had two guitars. There's a left and right guitar on that, playing everything. And then there's, of course, the bass, the drums, and then there's the lead guitar. So that's all recorded into my DAW, which is Logic. And then since I was using an amp, I'm using my Focusrite as my interface. Yeah, so that's how I do that. So it's not so much like a loop, necessarily like a looper pedal would do. These are actually all individual tracks stacked on top of each other. Hopefully that makes sense. Awesome. All right, guys. We're going to get going. There's a few more people in here than there was before. I'll recap how we're doing all this, and then we'll get going on it. So basically, for the clinic, so I'm going to go over each section one at a time. If you have questions over any of this stuff, just remember them or jot the questions down or something like that. And after I cover each section, then I will do like a short kind of like Q&A, like if you want me to play something again, or like reiterate how I'm picking, or any of that kind of stuff, you can ask it at that time. So let me get this going here. Thanks for this. Awesome, yeah, perfect, man. Sorry, I was not understanding at first. But yeah, so make sure you have the tabs. If you don't have the tabs, go to the live clinic section and pull them up. And we are gonna get going on all these. Oh, I see what happened. There's that. There's that. Look at this. I'm getting all the windows. Oh! Okay. Alright, guys. So let's go ahead and we're going to dive into this thing. So like I said, just hold your questions. I'm not really like watching the chat too much while I'm teaching. But we're going to dive into this. Now, what I wanted to do as kind of just like something that was really fun to me was learning how to outline chords. And just getting to where you could incorporate that stuff into your normal playing. Because, a lot of times if you're playing a G chord, you can outline it a lot of different ways. But you don't always want to do that. Maybe you want it in more of a lead kind of way. And a way that I found to kind of like make it all make sense to me was I'm arpeggiating it in a normal way, but I start with basically like the groundwork of the arpeggio. So what I did was I started here with an A major. And I think learning your major and minor arpeggios all over the place, or at least the shapes of them, I view a lot of them as shapes around the guitar neck, are really powerful, because then once you start learning the formula to make different chords, like your major 7, your minor 7, your dominants, your add 9s, your minor 7 flat 5s, all that kind of stuff, you can apply everything to these major and minor chords and realize like, oh, I only have to tweak what I already know a little bit to give it a whole new sound. And that's what I did with this. So the first one here is a good old A major arpeggio. You know what? It works. It's an arpeggio. So what it looks like is this, and I'll break it down slow. Okay. That's it, with no kind of like octaves necessarily yet. Now, let's kind of break down exactly what I'm doing here. Now, I start with my pinky finger, so I'm playing 12. If you already know this stuff, this first one might be a little bit boring to you, but it'll kind of pick up here in just a second. So I'm playing 12 on the low E string with my pinky. I go to 11 on the D, 9 on the G. Already, this is a really important shape. That's already outlined the A major chord. There's our 3 notes that we need to outline an A major. 3rd, 5th. Okay. Now what happens here is I go back to another A note. I play 10 on the B with my middle finger. So now we're repeating notes. Okay, and then I'm going to go to 9 on the high E string. And that's it. That's the full arpeggio. This is a very very much like inside the cage system. You hear them talk about the C shape and the D shape. And that's essentially what this arpeggio is. It's the combination of two different shapes. Now, to talk about the picking for a second, I always recommend people try to do it both ways. So try to sweep it, but also try to alternate pick it. I think that alternate picking one note per string stuff is so tricky. It has always been like a really good challenge. So if you if you're used to alternate picking, you know, like scales or something like that, try doing some of these arpeggios just alternate picked. It's crazy. Because I naturally want to sweep it. And if you're wanting to sweep it, just remember, you have to treat it, even though we're going through 5 strings, it's not 5 individual motions. It's one motion through 5 strings. So you can see my hand. See how it's almost like I'm just moving my hand once. It just falls through the strings. And then I go up. I'm also adjusting the angle of my pick. So when I'm ascending like this, my pick is like that. When I do it the other way, I flip my pick. That way I'm taking the path of least resistance. Okay, so that's the first one. That's like the foundation of all this kind of stuff. And it's a nice one because this 12th fret here, that's your root note. So I always found my root notes when I found arpeggios. And I'm like, oh, well then I can move the shape anywhere. So anywhere you start, whatever this note is, as long as you do the shape, it's now that note's major. So I can do E major, F sharp major, G, A, B, C, D, and so on. So any questions over that first one? So I have a C in the chat. So I'll chill for a minute and see if you guys got any questions. Because like I said, it picks up here in just a minute. I know there's like a delay, like 30 seconds between you seeing it and me sitting here. So if you see me just sitting here like doing nothing, it's just I want to make sure I give time for the chat to move if it needs to. Empowering, especially if you move it up and down the neck to a different root. Exactly. Well, in Wolverine, a thing that's really cool is think about like what's the most common chord progression ever. It's 1-4-5. It doesn't matter if it's a blues 1-4-5. That's a little bit different. But just think about like every pop song or anything like that, ever written in history in the past 20 years. That's not true, but a lot of them are 1-4-5. So G, C, D. So practice outlining 1-4-5 chords with this arpeggio. So G, C, D. And move up to C. Sounds a whole lot more like music than just good old like noodling around or like doing the like chromatic stuff. Not that you don't want to do that stuff too, but why do you pick your fingers up and put them down instead of just moving one finger? Can you show the minor version, or is that next? Yeah, I'll show you the minor version here in just a second. I pick my fingers up just because I don't want the notes to ring out. I assume you're asking, Scott, like, instead of like picking my fingers up completely off the guitar, I'm picking them up toward just to get the string to stop. Is that what you're kind of asking? could just be because like that feels more natural to my hand. I just want to get them off of the string is really what's happening. That way it stops ringing out, because when you're playing with distortion and doing these arpeggios, the notes are only there for a second. There we go. This will make jamming to backing tracks much more musical than scales. Exactly. And what you can do with this is, if you know your scales, so say you know your G scale, you know, and you're used to playing it like this. Now all of a sudden you have this, I'm always talking about it, diagonal look. So I could go. It just sounds different when you go versus going, you know, it has a different sound to it. The minor one, I actually move on to a different one, but I'll show you the minor real quick. Who asked that? Minor, Chris. So this one is not tabbed out, but I'll show it to you real quick, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is we're going to actually transition into a dominant 7, which is adding a note to our major chord. So the minor one, a really good way to practice it and to think about it is all you do is take all of your major thirds and you flatten them, you know, a half step. So it turns it into a minor third, and boom, you've got your minor. So the first thing to do is to know where all your major thirds are. So basically, any time that we were playing those C sharp notes, right there, those are all major thirds. Okay? So all we have to do is we have to take them and move them down a half step. And the way that it would work as far as like fret-wise, it goes 12 to 10 to 9 to 10 to 8. Okay? And that's the same thing. Like that's a root position shape. So move it all over the place. Okay. While the alternate picking, will the alternate picking increase left hand, right hand coordination? Absolutely. Because when you're alternate picking a single note string and a single note per string idea, your hands have to be extremely coordinated because the timing is so different because you're jumping from string to string to string. So these hands have to be in sync. So that's why it's so powerful to sit there and get used to doing that kind of stuff. However, I'm just starting the Fretboard Decoder. You mentioned that you use a 3-note per string shape and not the box type. Why so? Do I need to learn both eventually? Yeah, I recommend learning both. I mainly, it depends. I use them both at different times. So I thought about doing another one talking about the box shape because I learned them both. The 3-note per string one is the main one I use for like soloing. But I use the box shapes more for chordal things. So if you have your box shape, it just makes it easier to see your the 7 notes of the major scale in one position versus like this, it spreads them out. And a lot of times when you're doing chords, you know, I need to be able to see where they all are right there. So I say learn both. Peter says, can you also slide the shape 1 fret down or up for minor? No, it depends on what shape. If you take that major shape and you slide it down, all you're doing is sliding your major shape one step down. So you need to physically change your shape. So major, minor. So if you want it to sound minor, you have to do the opposite shape. All right, so we're going to move on to the next one. Now, the next one is, I'm just simply adding a little bit to it. Yeah, if you just move it down, it's going to be flat, you know? So you're like, hey, okay, well, that's my G sharp now, or A flat, whatever you call it. But the next one now is we're adding a note. And this is where, like I said, these are all just concepts, you know, is really what it all comes down to. And that's what I've always taken away from learning stuff from other people. It's good to know the licks, you know, like learn someone's licks and phrases and all that stuff. but it's always good to see like what's the underlying concept. And for me, the concept is taking the most basic arpeggios, which are your major and minor ones, and then translating them into other ones. So I chose to do dominant because I figured a lot of us are maybe playing like blues rock stuff. I use dominant and minor 7 arpeggios all the time. Any of like the big arpeggiated runs that I ever do are typically either dominant 7, minor 7, or major 7 arpeggios. Not sloppy like that. So that's just kind of how I've always liked to do them. And I feel like the shape is much more convenient. It's just easier to do. So to know how to do this, you have to know how to make a dominant 7 arpeggio, or at least the notes that are in it. So if you're learning stuff like Fretboard Decoder, like the notes of the actual scales, all that stuff is really important because that's how you can understand these formulas. So, and I'm not going to go like too far down the theory rabbit hole for this one, but basically a dominant 7 arpeggio or chord is your root, your major third, your fifth, and your minor 7. It's why blues is so fun to play over, because you can do both major and minor, because the chord is a very like unstable sounding chord. Like listen to like a dominant 7. Like you hear it and you're like, oh, it's major, but that minor 7 gives it this rub. So you could play minor over it. So there's minor, or I can do major. They both work over it. It's because it's this weird, funky sounding chord. So I chose to do it like this because it's just, like I said, it's one I use all the time. And basically we're going to go like this. We're going to go 10 to 12 now on the A string. So I'm only adding one note. So I'm adding my minor 7 into this, before mentioned arpeggio. So I'm going 10 to 12. Now that 10th fret there, that's our G note. That's our minor 7 out of the key of A. Okay? So I go 10 to 12, and you'll notice it instantly jumps right back into the arpeggio that we already know, because I only add the G note when it's there. So 10 to 12 on the A, 11 on the D. Now I have changed the way I'm fingering it, and you'll see why here in a second. 11, and then I go to 9 on the G. Okay? And then 12 on the G. Here's another new note. It's the G note, but okay. And this is why I started out like this. It just feels more comfortable to me to do that. That way my hand's ready to stretch for that 12th fret. So I get that with my pinky. Now I also go to 10 on the B. That's just our A note again. And then let me make sure how I did this last part here. Okay. And then I go to 9 on the high string. Then I'm adding one more note here. I'm adding this 12, which is actually just an octave of a note we've already played. Okay, so we have this so far. Okay, and then basically I just descend all of that. So I go back to 9, back to 10, 12, 9 on the G, 11 on the D, and then 12 to 10. And I always thought it had a really cool sound to it. Now let's talk about the picking here for a second, because there's a few things that you can do for picking. I'll show you the way that I do it. And it requires me to do a hammer-on. So basically any string that has 2 notes on it, I pick the first one and hammer on the next note. And the reason why I do this is because it keeps it in that sweeping formula. Basically, if you want to sweep this kind of thing, you have to do it this way. And then same, and vice versa. When I'm descending, then I go pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, pull off. And if you feel more comfortable using your fingers like, or a different fingering than what I'm using, by all means, just go with it. Go with whatever feels more comfortable. But that's how I do that one. Now you could alternate pick it. The whole thing if you wanted to. And see, I've never tried economy picking. Nope. I guess you could, but you have to start on up, which is weird. I've never done it before. So, like I said, what I call this is I call it the 2-1-2. It's just something that I figured out that this shape worked all over the place. It was never really shown to me. I just started realizing, and it's not like I'm the first one to do it. Lots of other people do this. But when I figured it out, I was like, oh, that's really cool, because it's easier than doing those super fast shifts, but it outlines a new chord. So think about if you did like a blues progression, for example, and you did all if you did all dominant sevens, no nines or anything like that. A dominant 7 to D dominant 7 to E back to D. Okay, and then practice outlining them, because remember, where was our root note at? The root note never changed. We're just starting behind it now. So we're starting 2 frets behind it. So again, I view it as a shape. So I'm like, okay, so there's my A. Well, then I went to D. All right. Then go to E. I think I picked the wrong guitar for playing all the way up here. Oh, sorry. Okay, but now I'm outlining the chords, and I'm not saying you have to like do it just like that. That is a very strict arpeggio sound, And later on, what I do is I start tweaking it a little bit, and I'm gonna explain a little bit how I think about adding stuff to it to make it not just sound like you're playing the arpeggio, because that's a very like guitar sound right there. So, any questions over that one? I just realized when you alternate pick the same. Oh yeah, so I answered that. Yeah, so if you're doing it, those strings do get alternate picked. But if you do the hammer-on thing like what I did, then you can do the sweeping motion. My favorite picking has never been strict alternate picking. It's always been the combination of, both. Because I feel like it has a more dynamic sound to it than just alternate picking everything. Sorry, and I'm not very warmed up today, but anytime I'm doing stuff, I think have the ability, like, if I want everything to be picked out, I'll work on it and get my picking chops up to speed. But if I'm just playing normally, I like the sound of like what I just did. Like, and I'm not picking everything. So, like that shape, awesome, very cool. How would you recommend practicing this with a metronome? Let's find. Oh, you know what? I don't have a metronome on here. Let's see here. What is this metronome set at? Oh God, it's at 180. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that or not. But if I was to practice this is 180, so I'm not gonna try to do like 16th notes over this, but I would just kind of go like this. Your eighth note, do quarter notes, you can just mess around with all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I found it really helps me if I have some metronomes just click the same. Make sure you have a metronome that tells you where the 1 is. Like here, mine's different. Click 1, 1, 1, 1. So like I said, you can hear. I messed up. kind of I practice. Now I wouldn't do it at 180 BPM. That's just what I didn't want to mess up the track that I was working on. So that's just kind of where that one ended up. But yeah, hopefully, yeah, eighth notes, quarter note. Like I said, it's always a hard question for me to answer because it completely depends on the BPM that you're playing at. So like, obviously at 180 BPM, doing quarter notes, pretty easy. You know, it's not like a big task. But if you're trying to do 16th notes, but you're at 90 BPM, you know, again, that's not as grueling as 16th. Like I said, it's always such a challenging question to answer. So I always say just do eighth and quarters to start off with, and then slowly increase your metronome speed. You know, just little increments at a time. So don't try to jump up like 10 BPM because that's in my opinion that's too much. That's too much of a variant. You almost want it to feel like there's no difference. So that, like when I would work on students to get speed, we would do that kind of stuff, and I'd be like, all right, we're gonna like chart how fast you're going. Like when I was doing in-person lessons and stuff. And I remember one guy, we kept doing it. I'm like, nope, I want you to practice at like it's like 120. We're doing like eighth notes, and before we knew it, after like a couple weeks of doing it, I was like, do you realize how fast we are now? And he's like, what? No. I'm like, we're at like 150. You went up 30 BPM, and before you couldn't have even like played 140 and kept it clean. Wow. I was like, yeah, that's how you have to do it. You know, you just little increments to where it doesn't even feel like you're playing faster, but you're just you have to like microscopically build up the muscle memory to play fast. So I think we're gonna jump into the next one then. Sure thing, Chris. No problem, man. All right. Now, example number 3. Let me make sure I remember exactly what I had here. Is adding something, and this was actually one of the hardest things for me to learn how to do. Is I'm adding a note that has, to me, no purpose behind it. Like, there is no big theory. Oh, sorry. Can you show the finger? Ascending G to B. Oh, sure. 10 most used pentatonic licks, and you're way faster than my metronome limit, which is 400. Ooh, yeah. I don't even remember what those licks were, to be honest. That's an old video. The first position again of the G to the B. Yeah, I went like this. If you watch my fingers, I go like this. This is just what feels comfortable. Here's the G. Pointer, pinky, middle, pointer, pinky. Did I shift back? So if you notice, I ascend and descend the exact same way. I always recommend trying to do that. That way your hand's not learning two different positions. Think about it. Like if you ascend one way and descend a completely different way, your hand has to learn essentially two different shapes, two different patterns. And it makes it harder and it makes you learn things slower. So if you can keep everything as much as possible similar, your hand picks up on it more. Much harder. Eighth notes. Yeah, it takes a little bit because if you think about how many notes we're playing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's an odd number of notes. So that's why it's going to feel a little bit weird because what happens is your 1 on the click is not in the same spot every single time. It's moving. So it's a really good practice to get used to hearing a moving click because you'll, like I said, you'll notice that where if you practice something that's a nice even number, you know, if you're going, this click is always like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, you know, whatever it is, you're like 1, 1, 1. It's always there, but whenever you play with these odd numbers, like if you're doing like Eric Johnson and stuff, can't do it. The 1 moves, and it's definitely a challenge. So the next thing here, like what I was saying, was this this idea of just adding random notes. I never understood these guys, Sean Tubbs or a buddy, Leonardo Guzman. They would add all these chromatic passages to stuff, and I'd be like, how do you know when to add chromatics? And they're like, I just add them. And what I finally figured out, again, this is all just stuff that worked for me, was as long as I started sandwiching these out of key notes, they seem to work somehow. I call it in and out. And I did a very subtle one here, but a lot of times when I'm doing this stuff, I go, I'm adding a lot of it, and it's kind of like you have to turn off the scale part of your brain and keep it on at the same time. So I'm visualizing stuff, and I'm also seeing all these notes that you're not supposed to play, and I'm playing them, but I'm sandwiching them between two notes that are in key. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a rock guy. I don't want to go off on a jazz tangent where it's out for a minute. That's just not what appeals to me. So all I did in that arpeggio was I altered one note. I added it. I went like this. Sorry, it's my phone. 10, 11, 12. Now, if you wanted to get all theory-wise on it and all that stuff, we could sit there and break down why this note is a horrible note to play over A, that A flat. Doesn't sound the best. In that sense, but it's not there long enough to hear it. It's more of a rhythmic statement through it. Hear how it's there long enough to get your ear, and this is where I started having a lot of fun with this kind of stuff, because it's kind of like the no rules rule. Because all of a sudden I'm like, oh well, I just want to try that note. As long as it's in between these two notes that work, it seemed to never fail. So again, I go 10. So that's our first in key note and key of our chord. 11, that's out. That doesn't really sound the best against a dominant 7, and that's because that's a major 7 note. You've already got a minor 7 in here. Those two notes, you don't really find them together too much. Hear how bad it sounds? It just doesn't really work. So it's only there long enough to get your attention, and all of a sudden, sandwiched between those notes, not only did it start breathing new life into the arpeggio and making it just, to me, more interesting to hear, it's like, oh, well, what was that? And I'm like, it's literally, I just tried a note. But, that's all it was. I put zero theory behind it other than knowing these were the correct notes, again, correct notes, and this one's not. And I'm like, but it's between two of the in-key notes. And you can really, get carried away with doing this stuff. And if you want it to sound more out, do the opposite. Go out a key note, in key note, out a key. So that's out, in, out. I typically stay for in, out, in. And like I said, it lets you get away with everything. Okay? So we have that. Those are 11 on the D. 9 to 12 on the G. Let me remember how far out I went with this. Okay, I only did the one. 10 on the B. 9 to 12 on the high E string. And then I ended it on 10 on the B. Like I said, it has this little bebop-y kind of and that's where you start messing around with different rhythms and stuff like that. But what if I wanted to get more out? And again, the only theory I'm using is this shape. I'm just trying other notes. So I could go okay. So again, look, here was our shape. I'm just going to play this note. Why? Because it's there. That's the... Or maybe I'll go like that. Or maybe something like that. And what I found that happened is it makes you think in a completely different way than scales, because you're focused 100% on the creativity of the notes, how do they sound together, and a lot of times rhythmically. Because like I said, if I just played it real nice and slow and didn't really like add any of that bounce to it, didn't have the same kind of like pizzazz to it. Because I'm hearing, you know, there we go. But and I was just kind of letting my hands do their own thing. I was just trying. And it takes a long time to get to that point, but if you never exercise that ability, you know, it's so hard to break the habit of like needing to play the notes of the scale, the notes of the chord all the time. Because sometimes the best notes are those bad ones. You know, the bad notes can make a good lick or a good chord or whatever sound even better. See, like I said, you can get as out as you want. And to me, that was too much. I didn't like that. But a lot of guys can make that work, you know, and they enjoy that really out sound. So any questions over that kind of like reiteration of it? Because I do that stuff all the time. You know, oh, sorry, if I can do it. A lot of times I call it faux outlining the chords, because I might not know the chord that they're playing, but they might be like, I'll be like, okay, they're on, I know it's some kind of D, that's a power chord of course, but if they're doing like some like funky, like, some funky sounded D, do you use the off key in the middle of the lick, or do you just try to resolve it to it? No, I use the out of key note. You can do it anywhere. Like I just used it here, but I always resolve to a strong note of the chord. So, and it doesn't always have to be your root. And think about like your really like important notes to the chord. Your major third could be another like really good one to resolve that to. So, and you could kind of leave it there and resolve it to another one. And go back to your root eventually, almost like a call and answer kind of thing. So you can do both, but it's just kind of like all about deciding when the time is right. It's another reason why I like written out solos the best. Like I love hearing someone who's really good at improvising. You know, it's very inspiring, but I prefer written solos over improvised ones because I feel like whenever you write it out, you get to like really hone in on what's happening, you know, and you can find that perfect spot. Like, see, like there's like a new lick. I've never played that before. I remember what I did. You know, so it's just about messing around with it, and you know, you throw these little ideas in here to tweak what you already know. It's like, I always think it's important to build off of your strength. You don't always have to be like trying to build a new house. It's like just keep making the house you already got really nice. You know, you can still work on this new, you know, house on the lake or something like that. But don't forget, it's like, you know, you got this foundation. So that's why for me it's always been the pentatonic scale. You know, a lot of people learn the pentatonic scale, and as soon as they hear the modes, they're like, nope, done with you, Mr. Pentatonic. And then they go into the modes, and I'm like, yeah, but there's so much to be said with the pentatonic scale. It's such a powerful scale. I've always like viewed it as like home base. It's like, you know, keep working on it. How else can you like challenge yourself? Because it has the least amount of notes of all the scales. That's 5 notes versus the 7. So I've always viewed that as like my strength was pentatonic, and I used it to build off of into all these other areas. So to me, when I'm seeing this, you know what I'm really like seeing here a lot is I see a pentatonic scale. Think about it. Think about if you played your box 3 A minor pentatonic. It's almost identical to it. It's just tweaked a little bit because you got your major third in there. That's the only note that's different. Like literally take any major third and turn it into a minor third, and you have your good old box 3 A minor pentatonic. The only thing we've added is our major third. So any other questions over that stuff? Sorry, it's probably not the most like theory-based approach to it, but everyone I spoke to, they're like, I don't know, I just try notes. And I'm like, really? That's it? And like I didn't get it for the longest time. And then I finally just started doing it. I'm like, you know what? I think they're right. It's just up to you to understand how much your ear will allow that out sound. Because like I said, you could easily, start out like that. So I went out and in. Which is like, to me, that's too much. It's too out. I don't like it. But you can still... So any questions over those, guys? And at the end, we have one more example here. At the end, you can ask questions about the example or just about anything at all. I always hang out for about 10 minutes. You can ask me gear questions, whatever you want, and I'll answer any and all questions. How do you use your off keys and still sound good while when I use it, it sounds like a mistake? I think a lot of it has to do with rhythmically, how it's flowing. I use the off-key notes almost exclusively for rhythmic purposes. They're not really there meant to be a strong note because they're not a strong note. They're a very weak note. So it's kind of like, think of it as, you're hopping across the pond or something like that, and you've got all these big stones, and you have this little stone all of a sudden. It's like, oh, you probably want to get off of that one as quick as possible. And like I said, it's because if I played it slow, that note really jumps out. But when I add that little like bounce to it, and just always make sure you're resolving it. I resolve it to really strong notes, because if the lick starts out strong and ends strong, I don't want to say the middle is not important, but the strong beginning ending can make a weak middle of the lick or phrase, whatever it is, sound strong because it started and ended so strong. Does that make sense? Sorry, I was like confusing myself there. Both the music and your teaching style, your technique videos are exceptional. Oh, thank you very much, Guitar Head. Joe, so the tabs for this lesson are listed here? Yeah, if you go to the website, man, log into your courses, your 8-course bundle, there's a whole separate, like how you can see your courses, like pentatonic roadmap, all that kind of stuff. Go to the one that just says Live Clinic, and you click on that, and you'll see a link for the live stream, which you can rewatch this live stream whenever you want, and there's tabs that you can download or view on the website, however you want to do it. Oh, God. We switched to a new phone company, and they're like constantly texting us, like deals and all that. I'm like, no, stop it. Just do what I told you to do. Like, I don't need anything else. Do you mean that you use the off key like an embellishment and not necessarily part of the melody? No. Melody is a good way to put it. So when I say rhythmically, I'm thinking, to me, rhythm and melody are the same thing. So I am using it melodically, but like I said, it's just meant to add something to it that couldn't be there without it. Because sometimes it's like, it's almost like a singer. Singers are really interesting because a lot of times they move chromatically through a scale on their way to get to the note. They can sing. They might go like, something like that. And there's a lot of chromatic movements. Now, if I did it any other way, it wouldn't sound like that. I need to make that note up somewhere else. So it's strictly there for rhythm and melody purposes. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll thank you, Alex. Sorry, 1 second. My son. Oh, I'm sorry, Pablo. Hey, Robert, would you show the thumb placement moving during the run? Sure, absolutely. So I'm just waiting on my son to message me back. Okay. So thumb, how can I show this to you? Can I turn like this? Here, watch. Check it out. No, how do I do this? I don't know if I've ever asked for thumb placement. I hold my thumb kind of weird. So I'm going. I put my thumb kind of sideways, and that's because it allows me to keep my hand straight. Okay, so you see my thumb's not really moving much. The reason that is because I'm using my these 3 fingers to start off with. If I use my pinky finger, I do it. As I said, I guarantee my thumb will move. See how my hand has to shift a little bit? But when I start with these 3 fingers, there's no shift. Something I always say I'd rather stretch than shift. It's probably sloppy. I can't really hear my guitar. So that's my thumb placement. It's in the middle of the neck, pointed towards the headstock. But you can see if I do like normal stuff. My thumb kind of stays right there. There you have it. So hopefully that was helpful. This is super helpful, especially recognizing where the note, like the 3rd and 7th of the page is, instead of simply memorizing the shape. Yeah, exactly. Learning the note. That's why I said it's always about learning the concept of it, not just the lick. What does the lick really mean? Like, what are you saying when you play this lick? So that was always kind of what fascinated me. Sorry I missed your question a minute ago. Pablo. Could you show us a basic picking technique for scales like the pentatonic? I love the way you play the pentatonic opening for the Esmeralda bit. Sure, I'll show you that here in a second. So after I show this last example, then feel free to ask me anything outside of the clinic stuff. That way, I just like to keep it this way. I can link, put the timestamps for the clinic. So if I don't remember to come back to that, please post it again for me. Super helpful. Awesome. Well, there you go. I'm glad that was helpful. So yeah, so let's talk about this final one here, because it's just, again, you know, a little bit of the concept of it all is this. So it looks almost identical, but really, I think so many important things come from tweaking small little pieces of what you already know. It goes back to the whole, like, build off of your, like, strengths, you know, that you already have. So instead of dismissing the shape and moving on to the next shape, you know, how else can we change this? You know, you don't always have to be going like that, you know. So what I did here is I added one very subtle change to it. And it's all about learning how to redirect in the middle of a lick. Because if you look at it, it happens right in the middle. And this is where it's the most difficult area to change directions. You know, you get in this habit of like, okay, I'm ascending, let's ascend. But to change in the middle is really difficult. So I did one, like I said, very small thing, and you can incrementally do it more and more if you want. So I started out the same. I went 10, 11, 12 on the A string, 11 on the D, and then 9, 12 on the G. Then I went back to 10. So rhythmically, I just kind of like threw the other lick out the window because it's like, oh, well, hold up, wait, what? I gotta go back? Okay. Went back to that 10. Then I have to go 9, 12 again to 10. And then 8, 12 on the high E string. And then 10 on the B. Okay, so. You see how you can kind of like go off on a tangent and start building it in different ways then. And it sounds different now. Listen to the first one. This is where it all started. Listen to the first one. It's what we started with. And now we're at... Oh, sorry. So there's that one. And like I said, you can continue to go back and continually like redirect. And it helps, to me, have this kind of like... it adds a lot of flow and almost like a roller coaster like effect to your playing, because then it's not just going like, oh, it's all descending, oh, it's all ascending, you know. That's how I think we start sounding very one-dimensional, and it's a whole nother aspect of dynamics. You know, I feel like dynamics aren't just how hard you're picking the strings or how softly you can add the vibrato and all. Like, that's all part of a dynamic sound, but also this technique side of it, I think gets overlooked a lot. The ability to redirect and change the way the lick sounds, because if you're going through something, I think that sounds fine, but in my opinion, I like this better. You know, see, so how I kind of like... You know, they're not always moving the same direction. So hopefully that's helpful at all. But yeah, any final questions over the last lick or the other stuff? When you arpeggio and move up and down the neck, will it be the same box pattern? Is there a small set of arpeggios that make it sound melodic, making practice fun? Excuse me. Yeah, John. So basically, that's kind of like the shape aspect I had hinted on before. So this shape, what you have to remember is the shape can be moved anywhere. So make sure you keep it exactly the same. How fingers are spaced out, the overall look of it. So that's an A chord. You can move it and start on a G note now, and you'd get a G major chord. Sorry, I'm trying to get ready. Now, as far as the box, like the pentatonic boxes, it's all based out of the same box, but you have to remember, whenever you change chords like this, your boxes are changing keys. So now I would need to do this as box 3 out of my G pentatonic. You know, because I'm playing a G major chord. But overall, the shape can be put in here. You know, inside of it. And you can use them to create melodic ideas over the chords that are happening. So let's do like a chord progression that is a little bit more, you know, advanced, I guess, or something. You know, we'll do, it's called a 1-6-2-5. It's like one of my favorites. G, okay, to E minor. Then I'm going to go to an A minor, and then D major. Now we didn't really do the minor shape too much, but you can hear how if I do this, so G, sorry, then E minor, then I'm going to go to A minor, and then D major. It starts sounding very melodic, and it's fun to start going through this stuff. Oh, sorry. So that's how I can, you know, move that around. And once you know these shapes really well and just the notes on the fingerboard, it makes it really easy to bounce them around. So awesome. I'm glad that worked, man. Okay, Alex, love the sound of the bass platform for a musical run. Yeah, exactly. So any other questions from you guys? And I'll still be live tonight, as usual. Oh, the picking sequence. Sorry, someone asked me the picking sequence of the pentatonic stuff. 1, 6, 2, 5, which are minors. So your 6 is minor and your 2 is minor. So it's 1 major, 6 minor, 2 minor. So you have 2 minors back to back, and then your 5 is major. And the pentatonic picking sequence that someone was asking is, you know, pentatonic scales for me are mostly just alternate picking stuff like that. Like, you know, start with like all of those, like the descending 6s. That's a really good sequence to have. But I tell you that's picking it all, which is not how I would normally do it. If you're in D minor, like I said, I'm just doing 6 notes at a time. So D minor pentatonic, do 6 notes, 13, 10, 13, 10, 12, 10. Then go back to the B string and start over again. 13, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10. Back to the G, 12, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10. Back to the D, 12, 10, 12, 10, 13, 10. So that's a, you know, pentatonic picking sequence. Now the way I pick those sequences, that's all picked, what I just did. But the way I do it normally is I pull off the first one of each one. I go. What happens is it breaks up. Like if you pick it all kind of sounds the same. But if you add that pull off, there's a dynamic shift. So listen to it like all picked with the pull off. I can accent that note more. You know, when I'm going through it fast or slow, you can still hear the accent. Rob, can you talk more about blending scales and arpeggios? Yes. So, would the 6 and 2 be minor since 1, 4, 5 are major and bass here? Oh no, you're right. Yep, you got it, Wolverine. Sorry, like I said the delay gets in the way a little bit sometimes. Yeah. So blending them together is basically the way I'm seeing it is I see the scale and I see the arpeggios on top of it. So like I said before, like when we did the A major arpeggio that we did. Okay, so that's your A major arpeggio right there. Now think about like what's your A major scale. Okay. So you have to know your scale all over the place to be comfortable. You should be able to play A major anywhere at all without even thinking about it. This is all A major. It doesn't sound the most musical because I'm just playing a scale, but I can see. So look at everything I just played there. Where you can see it better. Now inside of what I just played, I'll tell you each one of the arpeggio notes that we just played. Arpeggio note, arpeggio note, arpeggio note, arpeggio note, arpeggio note, arpeggio note. Okay, arpeggio note. I'm going to leave out the A because it's just not part of this pattern yet. But like I said, inside of it, see, hear how as soon as I start adding it, it's almost like separately they don't sound musical. Scale. Oh, I'm sorry. Arpeggio. Neither one of those sounded very musical to me. Put them together. I'm sorry. And it starts suddenly becoming musical. So I think part of it is just you have to know your scale all over the neck, with where it becomes more second nature, where you're not really thinking about it. And you have to know your arpeggios everywhere, you know. I'm sorry. Those are all A major arpeggios that I just played. All major arpeggios. A major arpeggios. And like I said, I'm just seeing them over top of the scale, and what it does is it gives you the ability to do this whole diagonal approach. I feel like I'm a broken record, but when I started playing diagonally is when I started playing musically all of a sudden, or at least to me. You know, if you like any of my intro jams or any of the stuff that I've ever written that you've heard the music side where I'm like expressing myself musically, that's what I see. That's what I'm using. And that's just what, you know, what has worked for me. You know, it's how I could kind of connect what I was hearing. So, Chris, hopefully that was helpful, man. And sometimes it's hard. It's like, you know, it's one of those things, like, it makes sense to me, but how do I... But it's because I've just done it my way of doing it for so long. So sometimes it's hard to, like, put it in a way I'm like, well, I know what it means, but how do I explain what it means? It may be weird, but when running up a scale, how do you move the 4 fingers to the next string, especially with pull-offs? I have a hard time with that. Not sure much when doing runs. That's great. Thanks again. Time for this. Oh, dude, no. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Peter, I'll ask your question. This will be the final question of the day. And then, like I said, I'll still be doing the live stream later today. Tonight, I should say, at midnight. So move it strings, especially with pull-offs. Have a hard time with that. Not so much when doing runs. Yeah, you know what's funny, Peter? Is that everyone I've ever come across, when I was teaching, myself included, for whatever reason, you, like, naturally are better at either ascending and descending. I don't know why this is. I'm with you. Ascending came way more naturally to me. Like, I could do that, you know, pretty easily. Well, except I'm playing really sloppy right now. Okay, so ascending came naturally. Descending, hardest time in the world with it. But if you notice, what I kind of did was I started adopting my strengths into what I was doing. So, how I mentioned before, a lot of times I don't pick everything. When I ascend, I tend to pick everything. No, wrong scale. When I descend, I do this thing where I pick 2 notes and I pull off one. And that's just what worked for me. I just kind of found what was comfortable. At the time, there was no real rhyme or reason to it. I was just trying to figure out how can I get down the scale faster. That was like my thought behind it. And I found that I could do this. So sometimes it's like, you don't have to just always do it one way. Like if picking everything descending is hard, mess around with it some. Like I said, I found a real love for the sound of the picking and the picking and legato mixed together. Like, listen to someone like Paul Gilbert. He can pick everything, and he does sometimes, but the majority of the time, he does not. You know, Paul does a lot of, you know, all those licks where it's kind of like a combination. I can't do that lick anymore. I can't remember what it was. So, a lot of times I opt for that. So I might ascend and pick it all, you know, all the way up the scale or whatever it is. But when I descend, it's more like pattern based. So yeah, awesome. Well, other than that, guys, hey, thank you all so much. For one, if you're here, you got the course. I really appreciate that. Thanks for being willing to spend your Saturday morning with me, just hanging out, getting nerdy with it. Make sure you get the tabs. I'm still going to do the timestamps. I got to do last week's timestamps and this week, so I'm going to try to get that done this week. But, you can watch this recap whenever you want. Oh, sorry, let me actually do this. We don't need this camera anymore. There we go. Hello. And if you guys are around tonight, I'll be live at around midnight. So other than that, I hope you all have a great Saturday. Thank you again for getting the course. I genuinely appreciate that so much. I remember this last NAMM, which is kind of crazy because everything that's going on. So many of you guys walked up to me and, said hi and was like, oh yeah, I got your course. And it was like, I don't know, it was a real humbling experience. Is there a live class like this? Yes, there is going to be another one next month. So normally, anyone who's here who wants to tune into the other ones, I'm going to be doing one a month. I did one a few months ago, and then I did these 2 for the sale. And it went really, really well. But the normal courses for this, it's usually a little bit longer. It's an hour and a half. And those are $50 to tune into those, and you get... There's a few more examples and some tracks and all kinds of stuff that come with it. But I usually announce it, but those are limited to the number of people who can tune in. Because like I said, you can see how with 30 people here, the last one there was 50, and it was still fine. No one questions weren't answered. There wasn't 1,000 comments in the chat. It went real smoothly. So that's kind of the limit. That was the Rock'n'Roll Bootcamp one. I think Alex, were you at the first? You were at the first live clinic that was paid. I think you were. So Alex has been to one of those, and he can say whether he liked it or not. There's no pressure to say if he did or not, man. But sweet, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I started doing that because so many people were emailing me asking about individual lessons, and I can't really dedicate a day to doing that anymore. So I was like, well, this is an option if anybody wants it. It's this format. You can watch it as many times as you want. On YouTube, you can slow things down to half speed, quarter speed, literally whatever you need it to be. And it was yeah, exactly. And unless you were at the paid one as well. And so I'm gonna be doing more of those. I just didn't have time to do it the last 2 months. So those are gonna be coming back and everything real soon. I just have to get ready for the Rock and Roll Bootcamp Part 2 for at the end of next month. So hopefully I can still do a clinic next one. Wolverine, yes, the other ones are archived. So those are in there as well. Being here, yes, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna bounce it out of here. Go see what this kid of mine is asking me. Keeps texting my phone, and I'll see you all later. So hopefully